So I will thank you to Dave and the Sarasota Music Archive. My name is Max Tan. We are Soundbox Ventures, which is a new organization that started in the fall of 2022. How many of you have been to the Sarasota Art Museum? Yeah, the beautiful campus right off South Canyon, across from the Publix. We started a concert series there called Listen Here in 2022, and the whole idea was that most concerts that you go to for classical music have something to do with the beauty of the music. There's some kind of thematic programming, and we kind of go to concerts with this expectation of listening to a recording, but live. Although, in my opinion, I think it should be the other way around. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to use music to highlight certain ways that we listen and that we find meaning in the way we communicate. And so it's really about exploring what our relationship is with music and in our lives, rather than solely about the beauty of the music itself. In today's talk, because the Sarasota Music Archive is this wonderful collection of historical documents and recordings, we thought we would highlight the recording side of music making. The whole point of this Suncoast Composer Fellowship Program, and actually I don't know if all the Composer Fellows are sitting together, although it seems like they are in the back row over there. They are the featured, there are 6 fellows for this year whose music will be featured in a concert on Monday night. This is going to be presented in partnership with Ensemble New SRQ. If you look on the back page of the program, I'm so sorry we didn't catch this, but you'll see that on Monday we listed seminars at Selby. We're just so excited about this place. But actually it's going to be a concert at the First Congregational United Church of Christ, that's next to the YMCA. This will include a roundtable discussion with the Composer Fellows at 6, and the concert will be at 7:30. And one of the things we're trying to address with this program is that a lot of questions have arisen in the last couple of years about how does music written today enter the larger musical canon? Meaning, in my view, how does it get performed more often? How does it become known to a bigger audience across the continent, across many different continents around the world? And one of the issues, perhaps Brahms is calling it because I will be playing some Brahms later. But one of the things that is really problematic is you have so much wonderful music being written now, so many interesting composers, but a lot of them are not quite getting the recognition or the widespread acknowledgement or even just reputation that they probably should in order to have the career that they've chosen. And also because they are so particularly interesting or have a particular perspective on their music, it really deserves to be heard, and often finding those platforms is very difficult. So one of the special features that is part of this program and not part of Ensemble New SRQ is that while Ensemble New SRQ helps to commission and premiere new music, we do repeat performances of music by living composers, and so we work very well in this partnership. If you forget about if the details aren't in the program book, please visit our website and all the event info is there. I also, just a housekeeping thing, Dave told me that some people are interested in the chamber music concerts tomorrow, which is at somebody's home in South Vincente Park. If you would like to know where it is, unfortunately, the host would only like the ticket holders to know. So if you would like to come, there are still tickets left, if not too late. My talk today is titled How Recordings Redefine Music, from Brahms to Today. And the prevalence of composer-performers, musicians who did both, and perhaps even then some, before World War II. Today's musicians increasingly focus on specialization. You go to school for composition, you go to school for violin playing, you go to school for piano playing, for conducting, and it's very difficult to find ways of doing all of those things, partially because we only have 24 hours in a day, but also because the advancement of pedagogy and really getting that kind of musicianship to a high level is just so vast. That knowledge has expanded drastically in the last couple of decades. And so when you have a 4-year undergraduate program or a 2-year graduate program, it's simply not enough to do all of those things, and so we pick and choose. Certainly there's nothing wrong with specialization, but one of the things we try to do at this festival is to break down those barriers, and over the next few days, the Composer Fellows just arrived 2 days ago, but they will have time to interface with musicians to work on those works that will be featured on Monday. And afterwards, the composers will have an interview session with Tyler Klein, who hosts the show Modern Notebook. This is a show that's on WSMR, and so they've dedicated 3 episodes to our program to feature the composer fellows in these interviews so that people all across the United States can get to know who they are, and the recordings of the concert on Monday will be played again then. One of the topics of discussion, which centralizes much of performance pedagogy today, is that of good artistry and what that means. It's almost like an indoctrination. One of the primary roles of performers is to interpret the music, and to do so in a way that is faithful to the composer's intentions. After all, music notation is really, really imprecise. If any of you have taken a look at a music score, you see dots, you see lines, you see all these weird arcs and shapes and symbols, and it's really quite incredible that that forms a sufficient enough language that musicians, performers specifically, can translate that into a work of music that spans time. This is not an intuitive skill. Obviously, it has to be learned. One doesn't look at a staff and with the music doesn't immediately understand what it sounds like. But what does it mean to honor the composer's intentions? What does it mean to do exactly what is on the page? Since the notation is not precise, the music does not dictate, for instance, the exact length of time a note or its pitch should be played. It tells us proportionally that, a note might be 4 times as long or twice as short, but it doesn't tell us, for 2 seconds and 50 milliseconds or something to that nature. It's not precise in that way, although certainly some composers have experimented with that kind of indication. One of the benefits often espoused about performing contemporary music is that you can speak to the composer. They can tell you exactly what they had in mind, and there can be a discussion about how to communicate that vision in performance. That's really problematic for a lot of the classical music that we know and love, which some people refer to as the great masterpieces, works by dead composers, Beethoven, Brahms, who is actually the subject of my talk. The reason why I talk about Brahms and mention him is because with recording technology, this did not come into existence until around the 1890s. Sounds like it's 2 centuries ago, but actually it's not that far. And Brahms lived into that decade, and there is actually a recording of him speaking and playing, although you can hardly tell what's going on. So I will play for you that recording. It was made in 1889. Experimentation with tinfoil, because basically recordings would be made by screaming into the horn of a needle that would then etch out the sound waves onto a medium. And one of the things that was experimented with was tinfoil. Obviously, tinfoil doesn't last very long. You can tell from using it in your kitchen. But there are, instances of these recordings from back then. which we can only dream of knowing what exactly that sounded like. One of the things that's quite interesting about old recordings prior to the Second World War, or even before the 1930s when electric recordings came into being, is that there were several projects where composers were performing their own works. And before we get into that discussion, I would like to play for you a short excerpt of a piece by Frederick Lompo. Does anyone know who that is?
Yes.
Other than a musician. I hope this is larger. This is probably more symbolic, but if you are able to read music notation, this might be interesting to you. I'll play for you two recordings, and I would love to know which one you prefer. So here is the first one. Who liked the first one? Who liked the second one? Actually, it's not too separate. Wow. Can I ask why for the first? Would anyone like to volunteer? Sure.
I thought the first reminded me of Sati. It was very languid and relaxing and engaging, whereas the second seemed less immediately involved.
Interesting. Anyone else? Do the people who like the first recording agree with that? Yes.
The first one moved in a very slow, fluid manner. The second one, to my hearing, was hesitant and not together.
Yes.
First one conjured up in a beautiful image, where the second one felt very mechanical.
Interesting. Who liked the second one and would like to defend it?
I liked the second one because I felt that there were surprises to me, and it kept me more on my toes.
Okay, interesting. Anyone else? Yes.
The first one seems so even and classical, old classical. And the new one sort of made you think, like poetry. Not exactly even, but it engaged you to figure out where the beats were and where the notes were. It made you think more. It made me think more.
What the intent of the pianist was.
Well, it all depends on what his intent was. Exactly. And is it the same music, just performed differently, just rearranged slightly?
It's the same, it's from the
It's the
same
same.
score.
But so one was very calm, and the other one was take it and do it like a jigsaw puzzle and try to put different pieces in different ways.
Yeah.
Which was...
There's certainly that effect. I agree with you. I'm sorry for the sake of time. I would love to have like a whole discussion. But if I don't know how many of you understand French, but the title is to put to sleep the suffering. Which one do you think is more in line with that spirit?
The first one.
Okay, let's take a vote. Who thinks the first? Who thinks the second? Okay.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Was it the same person who performed it?
No, these are two different people, so I'm going to tell you about who these performers are. I won't give the name of the first one because he's still alive and he's very, very famous. He's a artist. And the second one is Migó playing it himself. So isn't that interesting how different our perceptions are, especially when we don't know if the composer playing their own works. And so for the musicians and the composers who are in the room, it doesn't look anything like what you heard. I mean, you could say maybe if there's a lot of timing or something, but it doesn't resemble as closely as the first one in terms of alignment and vertical notation. Yes, there's a...
Yes, I'm not hearing you very well. What
Oh,
was
sorry.
the name of the piece?
To put to sleep the suffering.
Okay, and if you could repeat what some of the people are saying because they don't have microphones.
Oh.
Talk into the microphone. And you need a microphone.
It's, okay, I will try this again. Okay, I will try my best so that this doesn't cut out. So anyway, I find this to be a very interesting example because the work itself is not very well known. Clearly no one really knew of this composer, but we do have several recordings of him performing his own music, and it is very different from the aesthetic of how people play today. I'd like to well actually I would love for maybe for the next minute if anyone has anything that comes to mind. What is so striking about the second one that might have put you off? And I invite the musicians to remark because the notation is there. But yes.
It was deliberate.
It was deliberate, yes. And what about the technique? I invite the musicians to chime in. Yes, Rainer?
The two hands are not together. Okay.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of synchronicity between the two hands. Anyone else? Oh, that was it. Yes, Nick?
There's an inaccuracy to the notation. Like it's inaccurate to the notation.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at alignment and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. I would also like to just introduce that maybe in a more modern recording, like the first one, it's a little more metronomic. It's a little bit more in time, whereas in the second one, the time is in the music. I'd like to play for you 3 examples of the Elgar Piano Quintet. Does anyone know this work? Never get my cursor to the right place. So this is the score for the Elgar Piano Quintet. I'm just going to play an excerpt of the first 2 pages. And there will be 3 recordings. They span a period of about 3 decades. The first recording was made in 1927. The second recording was made in 1933. And the third recording was not made until 1963. I can get my cursor back to where it needs to go. Okay, here's the first one. never quite sure where the mouse goes. It disappears. Here's the second recording. Nope, that is not it. So that's the second recording, and here is the third. Any observations across all three? Yes?
Well, even just sitting here for the little time that we've been here, I've already been thinking a lot deeper. And I'm not a musician, I'm an audience member, and I'm a music lover. But right away I want to think, was it 3 different people that played these recordings? And then how much time did each person spend with the piece before it was recorded? So for me, the second one all of a sudden came out with a lot more passion, and the other ones were a little softer, so that you're making me think already, so I appreciate that.
It's, these are 3 very different groups. The first one, the first group was handpicked by Elgar himself. There was a project in the UK in the 1920s. I assume many of you have heard of Deutsche Grammophon or the Gramophone Museum, Grammy Awards. There was a nonprofit for about 12 years that was called the National Grammophonic Society. It was founded by a businessman named Compton Mackenzie. And the mission of this nonprofit was to make the first and authoritative recordings of contemporary music at the time. And one of the biggest champions of this project was Edward Elgar. And so there are many recordings of Elgar conducting his own works. He never felt comfortable enough to perform his own works, and so he would work with other performers who he trusted to make these recordings. So that's the story behind the first recording. What's also interesting is, speaking of being in the public library and also the Sarasota Music Archive, which lives upstairs, is that there is a database. There was a project to digitize all of these recordings, particularly from this organization by the European Union. And they invested, I believe, millions of euros into digitizing this. And it's a very cute acronym for the database. It's called CHARM, which stands for something less appealing, which is the Center for Historical Analysis of Recorded Music. And so many of these recordings are available as resources for anyone to access on the internet. So that was the story of the first recording. The second recording was not done through Elgar, but what's interesting is that the second movement, which I did not play for you, is absolutely stunning, and Elgar asked to hear the recording on his deathbed. And so we know that there's some kind of approval, or there's just something very touching about that. The third recording, made in 1963, recordings were very, very much a thing by then. Probably still LPs, but recordings nonetheless. We're going to now, Sam, go ahead.
We're ready.
Okay, I don't know what's going on. One of the things we're going to do now is actually to offer a performance of the Brahms Clarinet Quintet, the first movement, which is featured on one of the programs tomorrow. So if this whets your appetite, I would love to see you there tomorrow. Historical recordings, right before we play, historical recordings not only give us a sense of what the music sounded like, but there are also recordings of performers being interviewed and talking about the way they teach or the way they play. So I will play just a very short clip of a pianist named Carl Friedberg, who studied with Clara Schumann, who's the wife of Robert Schumann. And he, I believe, is the only pianist for whom Brahms played all of his piano music, except for the Paganini variations, because even Brahms said it was too hard for him. And it's just quite beautiful. In this 50-second recording, you hear him talk about what legato is, what it means to make a connected sound, and you hear a demonstration of him playing.
Legato is something you get in the best way if you play so as if you were sorry to leave the tone you have struck.
Interesting to also feel like you're getting a music lesson from these recordings. Some of these conversations take place in our rehearsals, and we would love to offer you the first movement of Brahms' Clarinet Quintet. break. We'll come back in about 2 minutes, so don't go far. And I'm going to introduce the next speaker, who is my good friend Marc Cortes, who is also one of the composer mentors. It seems like everyone's in really healthy conversation. I'm sorry to interrupt, but the library will probably kick us out of here around 12:30. So I want to introduce all of you. I want to introduce all of you to Marc Cortes, who is one of my closest friends and a phenomenal composer. We were both in the same year at Juilliard as doctoral students, and if I can just brag about how amazing his work is, this was his dissertation, this was his life and sweat, blood and tears for the last 5 years. Marc is a really phenomenal, just a composer, but also thinker, innovator, and organizer. And I am so happy that he made the trek from Europe to Sarasota for this.
It's working, the mic, yes? Oh, good, no problem. Okay, fantastic. I'm very happy to be here. I just came from my hometown, Barcelona, and I really enjoy Sarasota. It's the 3rd time I'm here, and I'm very grateful for Max for organizing all these, and just very happy to share a bit of my research and my music today with all of you. So, today I just wanted to, as Max has pointed out, I have here his research, which, you know, it's not that big, it was good or anything, but still was a lot of research. And I just wanted to make a very concise and hopefully interesting discussion about Catalan music, and more specifically about the title of my dissertation, which is titled Music Behind Bars, 100 Years of Struggle for the Validation of the Catalan Symphonic Repertoire. So, just an introduction. I spent 7 years in New York, where I studied at Juilliard, my master's and my doctorate. And when I arrived there, I was thrilled not only because of the super high level of musicians and the thrilling life in New York, but I really enjoyed learning about American music. And I took some electives at school about American composers, and I was fascinated to discover all the history, all the different elements, the life of the composers, etc. And at one point, I realized that I did not nearly know as much of my own history. And I wondered, well, that's weird, how is that possible? Because I was not taught that. And so that planted the seed for my later research and dissertation, and also for, in my own music to research what is this Catalan element that I have and I want to share. It is actually very lucky that Max showed a recording of Migó. He was a Catalan composer. So you can sense through that recording, never mind who played it, either Migó or the other unnamed mysterious pianist, this sensibility, which I think is very distinguishable from the rest of Spain. It's something more introspective, more inner, right? More spiritual, more reflective as well. And as opposed to this more fiery, when you would think about Spanish music, maybe you would think about something more like fiery, the flamenco, the energetic, and I love that. I really love that, it's something that I also like that it appears in my music, but still. We will talk about this, and then my talk will culminate in a wonderful performance of first a piece that I will explain why this program, of a Ukrainian composer that's called Skory, Gabriel Chu and Max Stan will play that, and then Lucas Stepp and Tianyi Li will play one of my romances for violin and piano that will also be played in one of the following concerts. So looking forward to that as well. So, first of all, I guess you know what is Catalonia, or just maybe it's a nebulous term. So I come from Barcelona. You know what is Barcelona. It is in Spain, but it is also the capital of Catalonia. Catalonia is a province, today a part of Spain. But we have our own distinctive culture, history, language as well. People from there speak usually Catalan and Spanish interchangeably. It's not just a dialect, it's like another Romanic language like Romanian or French or Italian or Portuguese or Spanish. Luckily we have a fairly good situation there. I love my life in Barcelona. But throughout the history, there's been maybe an overabundance of negative events. We've been defeated in several occasions, despite having had maybe other successes. And actually, we have our national day, like the equivalent of the 4th of July. It speaks a lot of the kind of character of my nation. It is another day that, of course, here it has a whole different connotation. It is the 11th of September. And it is that day because we commemorate a defeat, actually. It is the day, the 11th of September of 1714. It is when the Spanish Bourbonic troops broke into Barcelona, which had been sieged for many weeks. So it was that time where we lost all chances to being independent. And then there was a harsh censorship and prohibition of speaking Catalan, etc., etc. So it's interesting that the nation decided to make that the national day, right? And this had ramifications, of course, in the culture, as we will see in this little talk that will deal about my dissertation. Still, I'm not a historian. I think that's enough to talk about history. Today, I think the situation is fairly good, and the implications between Catalonia and Spain are very complex, and really it goes beyond the purpose of my talk. But let's start. Also, I focused on 100 years. I said 100 years of struggle for the validation of the Catalan symphonic repertoire, because the biggest part, or the most interesting part of the body of works of Catalan music happened in the last 100 years, more or less. I chose the date actually 1920, because that's when Pablo Casals, you know, the cellist, here it's known as Pablo Casals, but he was Catalan, we really call him Pau Casals, that's his Catalan name. He founded his orchestra, and it really was responsible for organizing phenomenal concerts. And then I drove this right until 2020, which is the year of the pandemic, and also because I'm a composer myself, and it was a great excuse to really get familiar with all the leading composers of my country, get to interview them, to study the works, etc. And there's one more thing. I chose symphonic repertoire for a reason also, and that is that symphonic music might be argued that it's the highest expression of musical life in a nation or in a city. Just because, it's not because I'm saying that the symphonic music is superior. Maybe for performers it can be actually a bit more boring to play in an orchestra rather than making this chamber music, as we have seen here. Like, it's so intimate, like the looks, like everything, it's so fluid, so personal, right? But it is because symphonic music presupposes the need to have an orchestra, an auditorium, like a whole lot of economical resources, infrastructure. So it means like this city, this nation, this territory is cultivated, and there's also an audience that will come to enjoy that. So that's what I focused on that. But as I said, Catalan music is not just symphonic music, so as we will see later with this chamber music, my romance, it will be, I think, a good example of what I want to get through about the musical character, etc. So this history starts in the 19th century, late 19th century, around 1880. We had this movement that was called Modernisme, which was when Catalan intellectuals really tried to distinguish themselves from the rest of Spain. Like what they were saying, you know, as other nations in Europe, they were awakening. We have our distinct character, we have our traditions, our cultures. Then there were choirs that were made, and actually we have a very rich tradition of singing. And these were amateur choirs. They were made of the workers that, after working in the factory and the clothing factory, they sang together, and that's very important. All these movements also generated the first independentist parties, and then a very important cultural and political movement appeared, which is called La Renaixença. It's kind of the Renaissance not to be mistaken by the Italian Renaissance, which happened way before that. But it was the summation of all these, let's say, ambition to become distinct, to defend the language. The first dictionary of Catalan appeared. Also, I don't know if you have seen any pictures of Barcelona's Palau de la Música. It's a wonderful hall, modernistic, fantastic. It's also the time of Gaudí, the architect, and so many other really artists and orchestras as well. So as I was saying, Pau Casals organized his orchestra. He invited the foremost composers of his generation. Even like there were very significant premieres in Barcelona, and Barcelona started to become, for the first time ever, a relevant center of music and art. Something that I think would only be achieved again after the Olympics in 1992. I'm from 1993, and I live exactly in the neighborhood that was built for the athletes. I guess it also shows that I love my city. I'm very happy here to be talking about all this. Also, another event that helped a lot was just before that, the international exhibition in Barcelona that happened right at the turn of the century. So as I was saying, the city was gaining prominence, and there was this very celebrated group of composers that, similar to in France, like Les Six, they founded another group that was called like Independent Composers of Catalonia. It's not like they were independentist, all of them. It's like not affiliated with any other institution, and they were pretty diverse. But they agreed on focusing on the folklore and the singing, which were used in this strive to search for that Catalan language. And I will just put an orchestral example of this. I'm sorry, Max, I need the password of the just a cliffhanger here. Thank you so much. So it is a dance, which is a sardana. In Catalonia, we have these dances where we all make a circle. Although this music is not necessarily intended to be danced, but to be performed, it just uses the structure of the sardana. And it's by this Catalan composer, Eduard Coldrà, wonderful composer. And you will, I think, with this piece, catch a bit of this folk flavor, this use of some modal idioms, instrumentation. It has, let's say, a strong character, but I still think that it is a bit far from what De Falla, for instance, would do in the south of Spain, in his beloved Granada. So I can play maybe the last 3 minutes of this piece. And by the way, the title is Ampurias, which is it was a Greek colony in Catalonia. And this reflects a lot this Renaissance ideology, which was tracing back to the roots of Catalonia, like the past with the Romans, the Greeks. So it was this way to make homage to this and this research on the what is it that makes Catalan music Catalan. Okay. hidden gems that are not as known as they should. So let's explore what went wrong. We are in this height in the 1920s, early 1930s. We have composers like Robert Gerard that studied, it was the only Catalan disciple of Arnold Schoenberg, that he's organizing all these international musicology conferences in Barcelona. We have the premiere of Alban Berg's Violin Concerto in Barcelona, other pieces. And then all of a sudden, all of that gets interrupted in 1936 by the Spanish Civil War, where it was a republic, right, Spain, but there was a coup d'etat by the nationals, led by General Franco, which ended up winning, and then all of that, of course, was paralyzed. There were many churches that also were burned by the Republicans, many organs were destroyed. Pau Casals had to become an exilee. Many other artists, writers, dramaturgists had to flee the country. Orchestras were dissolved. It was very bad, of course. And even before the wars ended, as Franco was reaping more and more power, he was already instituting, I'm sorry, maybe it's not that good, he was already fixing and implementing, let's say, a censorship to regulate what art was supposed to be. Like the Nazis were doing, like the Soviets were doing with social realist music, the Nazis were also attacking what they would call like the degenerate music. Spain tried to do the same thing. The problem in Spain is that, in general, no one cared at all about art or music, so the results of these implementations were not as devastating, luckily, I guess, but also, you know, it was just a big disaster from beginning to end. So they wanted to do three things in particular. First of all, just like the Nazis did with Wagner, they wanted to appropriate the work of Manuel de Falla, which was the most celebrated Spanish composer, and I love him. And by the way, his mother was Catalan, his father from Valencia, but he grew in the south. So they appropriated his music and said, this is the true Spanish music, this is what reveals the Spanish raza, like they would say like race, which is a very ugly term. And of course, Falla systematically, although always very politely, he declined the offer that the government was more and more insistingly sending him of becoming the head of the culture department of the country. So he actually also had to exile himself to Argentina, where he died. But still, it was like the regime was pressing forward that idea of that is true Spanish music, this music of folklore, of flamenco, etc. Then they wanted to implement, or to let's say, potentiate Spanish opera, otherwise known as zarzuela, and then lastly to just program more concerts. But all these initiatives were very disastrous. Also, as the years went by, and it was so the war resolved, but still Spain remained a dictatorship. But it was under interest to be on good terms with the US and all the Western Front, and now we all had this common enemy after behind the Iron Curtain. So Spain became more open to different musical styles. So I did a lot of research comparing different books of around the 50s, the 60s, comparing what they were saying. They were books written by Spanish musicologists. I was comparing what they were saying then by what they were saying just 10 years before, and it changed radically. Before they were saying that Spanish music is the defense of the raza and this purity of the style and this flamenco and whatever. And then 10 years afterwards, they were saying, no, it's good to experiment, to be more open. Like in the end, the style is something that is relative. So you can see how politics taints everything. By the way, this raza thing, luckily, was not as dangerous or destructive to Catalan music, because surprisingly, maybe they were thinking, well, Spain is a nation of nations, and folklore is good, whatever it is, wherever it is in Catalonia or in Galicia or in the Basque Country. So, although there were cases, it was more of a really rare exception to see a composer persecuted by the Franco regime. The biggest damage was done by, well, all the economic apocalypse, the destruction of orchestras, infrastructure, the poverty that ensued, and just the mismanagement of resources, which is really, really sad. And then just this incompetence was something that was utterly systematic. I really would like to just get to read a page of this dissertation. I found out a story that was not known before. It was only known by that composer that unfortunately passed away in 2019, Narcís Bonet. He's a composer that is linked to the US in a way because most of the theory that is taught at Juilliard stems from him. He studied with Nadia Boulanger in Paris, and then Philippe Lasser, who's a teacher at Juilliard, studied with Narcís Bonet, and here it comes. I was shocked to see a book written by him at Juilliard when I moved. It was, wow, okay. But this story will tell to what extent really all this propaganda and all this importance attributed to music was a charade, actually. And it's not a happy story, just to follow on this series of more or less depressing realizations about the history of Catalonia. It's one more sad episode to add. But still, one cannot help but to maybe sarcastically laugh at it all. So, let's see. Yes. So, as I was saying, as an example of this musical decadent situation, the premiere of Narcís Bonet's La Pell de Brau can serve as an example. La Pell de Brau means the ox's skin, which is the name of a book poem written by a very celebrated Salvador Espriu, Catalan poet, because he said that the geography of Spain looked like an ox skin. That's why. And it's a very aggressive poem towards Spain. It ends with the quote like "Adeu España," they like bye bye, goodbye Spain, goodbye. So Narcís Bonet received a commission from the Festival de Música América España to write a new piece. Due to the official character of the Francoist institution, Bonet hesitated at first, but later decided to accept the commission, as he saw it as an opportunity for a defiant musical act. He proposed a work for narrator and 8 instruments based on La Pell de Brau by Salvador Espriu, omitting the fact that this book had been censored due to its Catalanist implication. The Festival de Música América España, unaware of Bonet's ploy, accepted the proposal without any objection. Because by 1967, Bonet could not find any narrator who was both an actor and a musician, he took up the role himself. The work was premiered at the Ateneo de Madrid, conducted by José María Franco Gil, nothing to do with Franco the dictator, luckily. The program notes distributed to the audience featured the poem in its original Catalan version and also in Spanish translation by Bonet himself. The act of defiance to the regime culminated at a specific point of the performance. As the composer points out in his short essay, like the creation of La Pell de Brau, and now I quote him, in the Ateneo de Madrid hall, as was mandatory at the time, there was a big portrait of Franco that presided over the stage. During the work's performance, when the poem says, "Sometimes it is necessary and mandatory that a man dies for a country, but never has a country to die for a single man," I discreetly turned, looking behind me towards the portrait of the dictator. Like, can you imagine this? Like, I don't know, Shostakovich has a work at, while Stalin is alive, and he does something like this, it would be immediate gulag, But so what do you think happened in that concert? The answer is this. Despite premiering a work with a censored Catalan text and putting forth such a discreet yet significant act during the performance, the work was extremely well received. It was broadcast over the Radio Nacional, and later on it would be performed in several venues across Catalonia, becoming a symbol of Catalan defiance, or as composer and musicologist Carles Guinovart would put it, it became a Catalan Guernica after Picasso's painting. However, unlike Picasso's Guernica, Bonet's music was not persecuted, nor did it create much, if any, uncomfortable feelings among Spanish or Catalan audiences. The tragedy of La Pell de Brau, that piece, was not only what it denounced, but the fact that there were no ears to understand its message, despite the undeniable quality of the composition. It is pretty depressing. It's not even, he could not even become this musical martyr that maybe, I'm not saying that he's part to that, but so that was in the 60s or 70s. Franco died in 75. From there on, there has been a gradual evolution in the, let's say, in the development of the whole country and Catalonia too. I would say in summary, because we are running out of time and I really want and looking forward to this performance, that the situation is improving, but still there is this mistrust from the programmers, Catalan programmers, to program Catalan music, because it is perceived as something inferior, something that doesn't deserve maybe all the recognition that it should. There's many reasons for that. We didn't have a proper romanticism movement in Spain, all the damages of the war, all of the underdevelopment. I myself studied at Barcelona Conservatory before moving to New York, and going to Juilliard, it was really life-changing. And by being at a festival such as this this wonderful occasion, I am very moved to be able to spread awareness about Catalan music and through my work, to discuss what it is all about, spread a bit this Catalan character, which, as I said, has this nostalgia, melancholy to it, it's playing with folk idioms. And before my romance, you will hear a piece by Ukrainian composer Miroslav Skorik. He unfortunately passed away in 2020. But there are striking similarities. Now, Ukraine, we all know what's happening there, very unfortunately. It's another country that has had a very unfortunate history. It's also, I think that the word, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it translates something as like the land, like in the border or something like this. So it's been a land that's been crossed over and over because of its geography. There's a lot of conquests, a lot of destruction. So there's this very reflective character, but also this pride. And you can see that in his work. This piece, which is called Melody, has become almost like an extra-official symbol for Ukrainians, that it's played over and over, especially in these very harsh times. And when Skorik passed away, I wanted to homage him and his music that I love dearly with my second romance, that's also called Melody. And you will see that there's some musical connections in the thematic material, but I also think spiritually wise, there's something that I hope that you can sense, and afterwards maybe if you will want to talk, I would be curious to see what is your reaction. So without further ado, please welcome Gabriel Chu and Max Tan for Skorik.
everyone hear me if I don't use the microphone? Thank you so much for choosing to spend your morning with us. It's so great to see all of you. I know that Sarasota has been through a very difficult time with the hurricane last week and possibly more storms to come. I hope that you all stay safe. If you are interested in learning more about the programs in this festival, there are events, 2 concerts as you see in the program book tomorrow. One is at 1 o'clock, one is at 5 o'clock. The evening on Monday, 6 o'clock roundtable with the Composer Fellows. This is at the First Congregational United Church of Christ. The address should be 1031 South Euclid Avenue. Either way, the website will have all of the information. It's soundboxventures.org. Please stay in touch, and we will have more concerts to come in the spring season. Thank you.